The misdiagnosis was that they were people problems, when in reality, they were systems problems. So it's not teachers being resistant. They didn't understand the expectations.
That is Dr. Melissa Sadorf, Executive Director of the National Rural Education Association, author, professor, and longtime rural education leader. She believes one of the biggest mistakes in school improvement is blaming people, when the real work is building clearer systems, stronger support, and shared expectations.
If staff are drowning, it's not inspiration for being better. It's time, it's tools, it's prioritization. It's making sure that we're protecting the collaboration time that we're giving them.
By the end of this conversation, you will learn how leaders can move beyond blame, strengthen adult practices, and build the kind of systems that create better outcomes for students and schools. I'm Dr. Matthew Flippen, and this is Transformational Educators. When you arrived at Stanfield, tell us a little about the strengths that were there and some of the challenges that you saw.
Stanfield is a rural community. It's a single site LEA, which means that there's just one school in the district, and pretty geographically large, 600 square miles. About 25% of the population lives on a Native American Indian reservation just south of the district office. Long bus rides up to an hour for some of those students. And there's not a lot of resources within the community. It is the school is the hub. And so that's both a challenge and a celebration that we were able to serve as the anchor for the community. A lot of poverty. We were a Title I school, but a very engaged population. So parents that were interested in making sure that things were happening for their students, and a governing board that was very supportive of what we were doing to grow our teachers and to grow what we were putting forward in terms of programming and initiatives for the students. So it's a unique community. But it was a very wonderful experience.
Yes. I love to hear that. So, were there some concerns, or how was the district performing before you arrived?
We sat at we had a letter grade system for the state of Arizona, and we were at about a C, a low C. So average. We were performing at that average level. Obviously, we're not satisfied with average ever, I think, as educators. So we wanted to make sure that we were upping our game, so to speak. One of the things that we faced as a district was declining enrollment. When I was hired, the student count was just around 900. And when I retired 12 years later, we were at 450. So rapid decline in enrollment, which does have an impact on the programs because it impacts your budget, which means it impacts your people, and it impacts the programs that we were able to provide. But even with that change in what the school looked like, we were able to do some tier 2 and tier 3 intervention work. We were able to set up an after-school tutoring program. We bolstered our extracurricular activities, because those are one of the things that keep students engaged and wanting to come to school. So we were able to do some great things even with some of those challenges.
You may know the statistics better than I do, but there is a large number of school systems that are facing declining enrollment. And so navigating that and still maintaining or even improving outcomes for the children that continue to participate is top of mind for a lot of educators right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you see challenges with misdiagnosing what the root problems are?
One of the things that I found when I came into Stanfield is that obviously there were people that had some concerns about the things that were happening or not happening within the system. But the misdiagnosis was that they were people problems, when in reality they were systems problems. So it's not, teachers being resistant. It was they didn't understand the expectations, or there was professional development that was needed because they just didn't have the capacity to do what we were asking them to do. Or especially in a rural community, capacity is an issue. So if staff are drowning, it's not inspiration for being better. It's time, it's tools, it's prioritization. It's making sure that we're protecting the collaboration time that we're giving them. So really, it's making sure that we understand that we have to look at the systems that are in place and support what we are asking our educators to do. And so we picked a few things that were solutions, and then we started backfilling. And one of the first things that we approached was some culture building and making sure that we were creating relationships with each other and with our students and their families, as well as the community at large. And we also then made sure that we were providing some high quality professional development. And that can be challenging in a rural community, but we had some great partners that we were able to pull in so that we were able to give them some skills. That pedagogy buildup was really important. So that's where we started.
That's great. No, I love that. I one of the reasons we are doing this Transformational Educators podcast is to highlight the fact that you can transform schools without replacing all your staff, without replacing all your children, without replacing all your parents.
Right.
That you can take what you're given, and that through culture and addressing systems and processes. But the team that you have, they really have got to feel known and loved and inspired by a common purpose or mission. And then from that foundation, you can move forward. I love that. And it probably is true. The most common misdiagnosis is it's a people issue. Was there something specific in the culture that you felt like needed to be addressed before you could move forward?
Really, what it came down to was we had teachers that were operating in isolation. They didn't talk to each other. There was not time dedicated toward encouraging, giving them a platform to do that. So we looked at the schedule to make sure that our grade levels could plan together. I mean, it was just that simple. And so creating, again, those spaces for professional learning communities, which are, at the time it was somewhat innovative. It's not anymore. It's almost an expectation that you have a learning community of some kind stood up in your school. But allowing for that. And then just really ensuring that we focused very laser-like on how do you interact with kids? How do you talk to kids? What are the expectations for behavior in your classroom? And is there consistency from location to location on what we are all saying and doing and how we are interacting with our children? And just even that, again, very simple, but so hard in practice to make sure that there's consistency and then fidelity to what we were committing to as a staff. That we were going to do certain things with our students and with our structures within our classrooms. It did make a difference, but it was just getting everybody on board once things were rolling.
Well, I mean, I can only imagine. So tell me what that looked like practically. I mean, as from the superintendency, how did you laser focus, get behavior and these skills aligned?
The first thing, obviously, was the why. People have to know why. Why is this important? Why are you asking me to think differently about what I'm doing? And so we looked at data. We had conversations with our families, with our staff, with our students, just so that we had that anecdotal information as well. And from understanding the why we need to do something different, we then started talking about, well, how? What is it going to look like if we do something different? And, standing at the door and greeting children as they came into the room, or ensuring that all of our rules were consistent. A traditional, is it safe? Is it responsible? Is it respectful? Was about as deep as we got with that. But it made a difference because everybody now is speaking the same language and has the same expectations, no matter where they are or where the students are. And having some consistent expectations across all grade levels was also important because we kept our families year over year. And when you have families that have multiple students, then they understand what the expectations are. You start to build this community and this positive culture toward, we want students to be successful. This is how we're going to help to do that.
But when you said connecting our why to and using data to drive that, my first thought was, oh, how does data support your why? So when you dove into that, you started to see the why was some children are not being successful, and we can see that in the data. And then the consistency that we need across the system. Is that the approach that you took?
Absolutely it.
With the expectation that educators want great teachers, right? Great staff, they want the children to be successful. And it doesn't sound like you're asking them to add more reports or paperwork, right? This is alignment of practice.
That's right. And it's not defaulting to blame. It's making sure that, we are examining adult practices and structures rather than, blaming kids or blaming parents or blaming the community. It's making sure that we're really focused on the right work rather than blame.
Hey, educators. I hope you're enjoying this conversation. At Graceland University, we believe real change in education starts with compassionate leadership and practical support. That's why we share stories like this. If something in today's episode spoke to you, maybe about your purpose, your next step, or how you can make a bigger impact, I invite you to explore how Graceland walks alongside educators through degree programs and strategic partnerships. Scan the QR code on screen or follow the link in the show notes to learn more. Now let's get back to the episode. So I assume you face some resistance to that alignment. How did you address that? What's that look like in a way that still maintains the culture? Because you're trying to improve culture, but also implement change.
Well, again, it goes back to that why. But we've always done it this way is something that I heard. And it can be very strong, especially in a rural community where that identity is built on tradition. And servant leadership really means honoring that identity while still insisting on we've got to change and grow for kids. And really that became okay, we've done it this way, but where are we now? And where would we rather be? And how can we get there? And including them in the process.
Yeah, I typically find that resistance is in pockets. Right. There's a leader of resistance. Did you make a special effort to win over those leaders of resistance? What did that look like?
Oh, absolutely. Visibility. Especially in tight-knit communities, it's risky to tell hard truths because you see these people out at the grocery store or ball games or in places other than the school, and so. Making sure that there was that visibility was very important because it gave them an opportunity to communicate with you if they had a question, to see that you were engaged and involved, that you were really invested in what was going on with both their education as well as, the overall well-being of their students and wanted success, however that was going to show up.
Now, you mentioned you were there for an extended period of time in this role. Where did you start to really see the culture and these outcomes start to shift the direction you wanted them to go?
It took a couple of years. Actually, the first year that I was there, I did a lot of listening and navigating just systems and figuring out where are we really and where are the gaps and learning. And making sure that they knew who I was, showing up so that they knew who I was and what I was all about. After that first year, we started talking about things that we could be doing differently and some expectations that I had as a result of we want to do better. And this is how we're going to do that. In those conversations with, again, making sure that we talked to people, we collected data, we talked about the why. There were some people that left after that first year. I was not surprised because that why didn't align with theirs. And that's okay. There are people that just needed something different. And so they were going to find it somewhere else. And that was fine. It was not easy for everyone to make that adjustment to doing something different. Some left, and then others, it was just, again, being very consistent from my expectations and from what I was saying and doing and how I was showing up, and then providing support. I can't expect that they're going to do something different if they don't have the tools to do something different. And so, again, professional development or time with experts at a particular content area, or whatever it was that they needed, and being able to provide that. I wanted them to be successful. The board wanted them to be successful. The community needed them to be successful, and so we were going to support them in growing and becoming all that they could be.
What was the couple key things you wanted them to know about you?
I wanted them to know who I was as an educator. And so being very vocal about my experiences, being very authentic, showing up with vulnerability was important. Being willing to take criticism, also important, as feedback, and honoring that they had an opinion. And, just being knowable. And I had an open door. And so anybody in the district could come through and have a conversation if there was a concern, if they just wanted to chat, if they were celebrating something. But being out there in classrooms, being out there in the hallways, and then also being willing to take those confidential conversations and say, how can I help you? How can I support you? What is it that you need? So being authentic and holding true to what my values were and what my expectations were for the benefit of students, and ensuring that they knew I'm not here to upturn the apple cart. I do really want to make sure that we're doing this together, and how can I support you in making sure that happens.
Yeah, and that does take time for people to believe, right? It's not like you can walk in day one, week one, month one, and everyone just becomes your best friend, and we're collaborating all with the team, right? It takes time. Now, hopefully, there's a few that jump on board right away, but it does take time. And I love that you invested the first year of listening and learning, sharing ideas, but not driving for change. But it was clear enough that some people said, this isn't the right path for me. And so that the second year, you began to implement more aggressively. So what ended up being a couple of years down the road, how did the performance of the school, and I know it's not just the grade from Arizona. I mean, there's culture and there's, a community involvement, but from your perspective, how you measured it, did it move the direction you hoped?
Yes, it did. Actually, while I was there, we got up to a high B, which is great. I will tell you that the superintendent that's there now, since I've retired, was the principal. She and I worked together, and they just got an A this past year. So they are definitely on the right trajectory. Another thing that was really successful was our Indian education, our parent groups. When I first got there were one or two people that would show up to those meetings. And by the time I left, they were much larger, 10, 12, 15 people, which out in that community where transportation is an issue, and their work schedules don't always align to the meetings that we were holding. We had people that were interested and engaged and wanting to be more involved with what their students were doing, which was great. That was one of our focuses. The other things that we noted were absenteeism. We focused a lot on, and I know that that's a chronic problem right now across the country. But even in COVID, we had pretty high attendance. And a lot of that I attribute to the relationships that teachers built with their students and those families. And that was a place that they wanted to be because they loved their teachers, they loved the school, they wanted to be involved and engaged. So we were able to see growth in those attendance numbers. I think another thing was we had more and more students that signed up to get involved in other things outside of the classroom. Not just athletics, but we had a Lego robotics team, and we had a 21st century program that was very successful. And so those kinds of metrics were things that we looked at as well. Are we reaching students, not just during the classroom time that we have them from 8 to 3, but are we also engaging them in more holistic opportunities to grow as a person? And the answer was yes. And then, of course, we always, we look to the community and to the parents. Are we meeting your needs? Are there things that we should be doing that we're missing the mark on? And our approval ratings from our parents and from the community grew as well. And so that was a metric that we really leaned into, because if our parents weren't happy, if our community wasn't satisfied, then we were missing something. And that was a gap that we would then need to figure out how to fill. So those were another set of metrics that we looked at. And then finally, we talked to students, which is probably the most important part of that whole equation. Are students satisfied with what we're doing? Are they feeling safe at school? Are they feeling like they're progressing? Do they feel supported? Are there things that engage them while they're there during the school day? Do they feel like their teacher is supportive of them and their growth as a person? And so, same thing, we saw growth in those metrics as well.
Did you do that through a structured survey?
Mm-hmm. We sure did. And we also had focus groups.
Fantastic. Yeah. I think that is a piece that I hear missing frequently of getting feedback from your customers. Some of those are predictors, right? I mean, that grade at the end of the year when, the state comes out, that is a lagging indicator, right? Those leading indicators, attendance, engagement, the survey feedback, parental involvement, all of those are predictors of, where things are going to go. So that's a great list, Melissa. Thank you for sharing that. When we think about schools, school leadership teams jumping in to make change, do you think there is a kind of a common misstep that happens? I'm asking you to back up and look at your work overall as you work with leaders really across the country now, and you're in this new additional role that you're playing.
Honestly, I think that one of the missed opportunities is really ensuring that you are targeting the right things to change. So have you done a comprehensive needs assessment? Have you started with purpose and guardrails and making sure that you outline the expectations for outcomes? I mean, what is it that we're going to stop doing so that we can do whatever this is well? And there tends to be the desire when you get excited about a new program or a new initiative or something that, is I want to, bright and flashy, that you're going to just jump into it and you're going to jump to that solution. But taking the time to be very thoughtful and intentional about, have you collected your evidence? Have you taken a look at your outcome data, your process data, your perception data? Are those things that you are taking a look at? Is this the right change that we need to be focused on? And really listening to people, taking the time to get the feedback to help you define if there's a problem that needs change. Are you defining it correctly and with precision? And ensuring that you are involving all of the stakeholders that touch that. We did that every year as a Title I school. You had to, as part of the expectation, right? Where we would have our 5 whys or a fishbone, making sure that we got down to the why, and requiring evidence. Is this really the right change? And here's why we think it is. And then making sure that we were realistic about, okay, if this is the change that we're going to see, let's map it out. What is it going to look like? How are we going to monitor? What are the indicators that we're going to be relying on? And how are we going to implement and check that we're implementing with fidelity or what have you? So, I would say that thing that comes across most often, it's not change for change's sake. I mean, it's not, old wine in new bottles. We're making sure that we are really thoughtful and intentional, that we are getting the right work targeted.
Yes, which I think is hard when you're a new leader coming into a new campus and you see things maybe immediately that you're like, wow, we need to change this. And you're even excited and motivated, right, to do that. But if you step too soon towards that before you've laid the foundation of trust and culture, collaboration, you really have probably hurt yourself by trying to implement something new without a process to get everyone on board and agree, and taking the time to do that. We've also heard from leaders that, in the process of their building culture and really asking about what's great about this school, what would you improve if you could, and just gathering feedback, I'll call it some low-hanging fruit kind of emerges that the staff, the team has already identified as things they'd like to improve. And by taking their feedback and then adjusting what they've recommended, you add to your credibility and trust in the system. So, does that mirror what you've seen?
Oh, absolutely. Why would you collect survey data if you're not going to do anything with it? And they know. I mean, if it's performative and nothing changes, even though they're giving you probably some pretty good insights, then why do it? And you start to lose trust, and people will stop engaging with you if you're not really truly involving them in the process.
So true. Yeah, you really that first time you don't do anything that was given in the survey as ideas, then you've shut that process down from being helpful for a while to come. Well, when you think back on your time is there a specific student or a specific teacher or maybe even a parent who just their growth during that time just really stands out to you as kind of your highlight of that season?
It's not necessarily one student, but there were a lot of behavior referrals when I first got to the district, and especially, a single site. Everything was going, and I did have a principal. I was the superintendent, business manager, grants director, HR director, but I did have a principal, which was great. And it was the number of office referrals, which, the teachers were frustrated. Again, we had some lack of continuity between classrooms and expectations. And when I asked teachers about that, well, kids are different, or parents aren't supporting us, or, those were the things that was the early narrative. And on looking at and doing a deeper analysis, we started looking at the data. Where are the referrals happening? What time of day? Is it, is there a particular teacher? Is there a particular place? We talked to the students. We did walkthroughs. And what we found was those expectations were inconsistent. We did a root cause analysis. It's not a kid problem. It's a coherence problem. And in the process of really focusing on school-wide routines and language, and coaching our teachers to focus on engagement strategies and formative checks, and making sure that they had autonomy to take care of minor behavior problems on their own and retain their power as a teacher in the classroom, the authority in the classroom, who didn't have to send everything out. With relationship repair built in, how do you protect that relationship? What we found was that eventually the number of referrals that we were seeing decreased, especially in those hotspots that we were identifying, and class time on task increased. Teacher stress dropped because the system was clearer and they knew what to do. And students really described that the teachers were more consistent and they were more fair. That word came up a lot, fair. So, the lesson that I took from that, and what I was really proud of, and something that I think was a a transformational culture building piece was that when you serve kids well, you have to build adult clarity first. And so not necessarily a particular student, but it was a system approach that really did benefit all of the students in the school.
Yes, for children to say it's fair, the discipline system is fair, that is quite an accomplishment. So,
yeah.
But yes, it's so true. So I think about my own experience through school and the variations between instructors. My youngest, our twin sons, are just finishing high school now, and they comment frequently about the variance between teachers, and it is, that is hard. It's hard for children, even especially younger children, to navigate, but even for secondary students. And so, that you smooth that out through, again, consistency, clarity, even the professional development that you did. All of that alignment is part of this bigger picture of improving ultimately, outcomes. And so that's, fantastic, Melissa. Thank you for sharing that. This has been super helpful. I can't wait for our audience to hear just all of the very practical strategies that you implemented and shared. How can our audience just learn more about your work and follow you?
Sure. So they can find me at the NREA website, nrea.net, and my email is melissa@nrea.net.
Okay. Fantastic. And then, of course, you host a podcast as well. So I would definitely encourage all of our listeners to tune in there. If you found this episode valuable, as I did, please share it with a colleague who could benefit. And if you're not already following Transformational Educators, please do so you never miss an episode. And then until next time, keep leading with purpose and transforming schools into places where everyone thrives. If today's conversation gave you fresh insight or inspired you to lead with purpose, please follow the show and tell a friend. It helps us reach more educators who want to make a difference. For more stories, resources, and tools to support your leadership journey, visit graceland.edu. Until next time, keep leading with courage and care.